Welcome to the Orange Zone. Could do with some fancy music for this part, really. Let's turn that microphone down. Hello there. Welcome. And it's almost like no time's passed at all. We're back in the painting saddle. Deeply experimental setup here, as you can see. Look at this. This might be the finest bit of lighting and focus that you've ever seen on this channel before, which obviously isn't ideal right now because you're just looking at blackness. Let's get something a bit more juicy to show you. Let's see if this guy looks good on here. There you go. When things start getting painted, that's what it's actually going to look like on this stream. Except as soon as I say that, it goes out of focus. I feel like, is that kind of optimum range we're going for here? Somewhere around there. So, good evening. A bit lower than usual today as well. The old camera right down there underneath one of the monitors. Very fancy, so you can't see my bed and all the other nonsense that's right behind me. Hopefully you can hear me okay and you can see everything, but this is all very fancy. I mean, look at this, scrolling text on the screen. Have you ever seen such a thing before? Well, you probably have. But it's still very fancy. And subliminal messaging as well, so while people are watching, they'll see the subtle hints down there. I'm not laying it on too thick, just subtly trying to part everyone with their cash. So I think there's a really subtle line coming up in a minute in the scrolling text, ordering everyone to give me their money, which should work in theory. Who have we got so far? We've got Graham, Raphael, and Steve. Hello there. So, what am I painting tonight? I've got here some bugs. These are from Bad Squiddo Games, and I put them on the bases that are for my Night Stalker Dreadfiends. And since I actually painted these, the real Dreadfiends have been released. But obviously mine are cooler because, look at that, they don't have arms. All they need, legs and faces. Legs and faces. What more does a beast need in Kings of War? A base, that's what it needs. So, we've got skull piles. I'm sure you can't see any of this too well at the moment because it's all just black. Skull piles. We've got spider eggs. And we've got all kinds of hideous insects and bugs and creatures. And I'm going to be painting some of those right now, in fact. First thing I'm going to do, probably, parts that are going to be vaguely pale coloured, because I've primed in black. I'm going to paint those in brown first of all, and then work from there. So, the webcam down there is actually inside the box of paint. So we're going to get this brown paint out first, which is Bootstrap Leather, which is the only P3 paint that I've got, which presumably because it came in a goodie bag from somewhere. That's usually why I've got one random paint from a particular brand that I don't have from anyone else. 2 likes on the video so far, not bad. So the Indian Rem show is back on Tuesday, by the way. We missed a week because Mr. Remington was having not only technical difficulties, but also he's moving house. Let's get this paint shook up, shall we? I don't think he's going through quite a drastic move as I did a couple of months ago. I think he will actually have more space after his move, whereas I've compacted my entire life into this room. And can you actually see any of my stuff in the background? You can probably see piles of my boxes of miniatures and armies, terrain, all kinds of stuff piled up in the corner there. We've got Ian in the chat as well. Good evening. Ready to pick up some red hot, sizzling, juicy, tender, moist, succulent, mouth-watering, finger-licking good painting tips. I've got my wet palette over here. And I thought, you know what, that sponge hasn't been in use for a few months now. I wonder if it's actually going to be any good. But just added some water, left it for a while, and it's still retained its absorbency. So Army Painter wet palette, you can leave it alone for months, come back to it, re-moisten it, and it's all good. If there's one thing we love on this channel, it's moisture. So let's get a bit of a fat brush because I'm going to be coating some large regions to begin with, such as these large skull and bone piles. I'm just going to paint the whole thing brown to begin with, so I'm not applying bone colour directly to the black, which would be foolhardy. So let's splodge some of this onto the wet palette. Nice big splodge. There we go, we're all splodged up to the eyeballs. And close that bad boy. Back in there. I will be keeping an eye on the comments, by the way. They've got an entire monitor to themselves at the moment, so I will see them rapidly if you start firing them in. I'm just going to splodge this all over. Splodge, word of the day, I think. Can't go wrong with a bit of splodging. This is just so I'm working from a lighter colour when I start the bonery. Can't be too careful when the bonery begins. Hopefully the audio is fine. I've got you on the webcam microphone because it's closer to me than the usual microphone I use for all my highly professional broadcasts, which is too high up, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time looking downwards in this one, so I don't want to be talking into that. Sounds like a nightmare. I'm going to get into those neglected crevices now. Raphael says, have you played any Necromunda yet? No, I have not. I will show you my Necromunda stuff in a minute, actually, because it's very exciting. I haven't played it yet. I'll apply these browns and then you can have a look at all my Necromunda juicy, succulent underhive goodness that I've got going on this table. So let's do the other bone pile on the other base now. We've got Sean as well in here. Hello. I don't know how frequent these videos are going to be, but if the temperature stays reasonable around these parts, then we could see them quite often. Now that I'm back in the saddle, got my painting set up already. One thing about this room, the carpet is very nice, and to prevent it becoming soiled by spilled paint, I've got quite an elaborate setup of coverings beneath the table here. The old painting table at my old abode was right above a rather hideous, ancient, grotesque carpet, so there was no concerns there at all, but this one's actually a bit too nice. So we'll hope that there's no mishaps that fly just beyond the range of the precautions I've set down there. Seeing some top quality bonesmanship here. Okay, bones done. Got a very tiny little water pot, rather than the gigantic ones I used to have. I'm actually going to change the water in this frequently instead of once every 8 months. I've got my brush soap right there as well. So let's just paint. In fact, I don't even need to. I've got the wet palettes. I don't need to brush. Okay, let's look at the Necromunda stuff. So I've got my corpse grinders, as you know. However, I've put Space Wolf heads on them. So instead of corpse grinders, these are actually the mustache grinders. So does it like focusing on him? A little bit. Probably just put something behind him. Let's try this. Well, it's focusing really well on that piece of tissue. I think you get the idea with him. So All of them have got visible heads, gives them a bit more personality. So there's the first three. These are the bigger, juicier, more succulent corpse grinders, or mustache grinders as they are here. Is it trying to focus on my trophy collection in the background there? Subtly placed so people can see all my triumphs. So there's the first three. Next, we've got this one. He's got a front plate missing, but I'll hold that in place in a moment. This guy, him, and that's what he'll be like with his plate on there. It's not stuck on at the moment because it's going to be too difficult to paint the face. So they're very spicy indeed. If we boot them out of the way, then we've got the lesser corpse grinders. So there's the two regular ones first, which don't have any conversion work or bit swapping on them at all. They're just the standard little guys. Now you're supposed to get 4 in the box. However, I decided, you know what? There's not enough ladies in this corpse grinder set, so I'm going to build 2 myself using spare parts from this box combined with Escher bits. So let's bring those 2 out. Let's get these 2 out of the way. So there you go. Chop the weapons off the spare arms from the corpse grinders. Chop the weapons off the arms of the Escher and then put the corpse grinder weapons into their hands. And put corpse grinder helmeted heads on them as well. So I think they look suitably grindy. And obviously these 2 and these 2 have got no visible mustaches going on. So they're obviously slightly less respected in the mustache grinder circles because of their helmets. But I don't think anyone will hold that too much against them. There's enough mustachery going on anyway, especially like this guy. Look at that. He's got hair attached to him. Very fancy pants indeed. Raphael likes the guy with the spiky shoulder pads. Which one was that? Could describe a couple of them. Maybe this one? I like this guy. Very cool. And what else? So, here's the rest of the Bad Squiddo stuff that I bought to go with the bases for my Night Stalkers. A lot more of the little bugs that can be cut out from here, more skull piles, more spider eggs, spider nest things. Look at all the eggs there, just huge old sacks ready to empty their terrifying and creepy contents onto the enemy. So quite a lot left there. We've got David in the chat as well. Good evening. Who have we got? We've got 8 people right now. Very nice. Rafael says, will you paint them orange? They would actually look great in orange pants, white t-shirts. Unknown. I haven't picked out a scheme for the mustache grinders yet, but I'm open to suggestions, and orange is obviously going to be considered. Let's paint some spider sacs, because these are going to be very pale coloured as well. So I'm just going to splatter these in brown, or splodge them in brown, shall we say, for now. I'm toying with the idea of having a bit of a webcam dangler, a webcam that just dangles above the table pointing directly down at the hobby zone, so that you can see what I'm doing without anything in the background stealing the focus. That's what all the professionals do. I just need to get another arm or something to endangle it on. You didn't think I'd make it through an entire episode without talking about danglage, did you? Like orange prison suits. Potentially. So I'm going to be priming my corpse grinders at some point in the next few days. Obviously the temperature and the weather has been better for painting here, which is why I'm doing it. But it has been raining, so not ideal for priming at the moment. I just like to step outside, into the fresh air, prime, away from anything. I don't want to get any spray paint on any of the surrounding terrain. But that does put you in harm's way when it comes to rainfall. So lots of insects and bugs, and they're all crawling out of this giant hole here. So it's a big, hideous crevice that the creatures are crawling out of. There's a spider crawling on this sack. So he's definitely going to get some paint on him, but I think he is going to be painted black again because black spiders are obviously creepier than all the others. I'm going for maximum creep factor with this army. Psychological warfare on the battlefield. We've got Stu in the chat. Good evening. David says, you fancy some 9th 40k mate? Well, I do have a 40k army. So I may dive in at some point. Especially, I saw something about Space Marines suddenly having 2 wounds now. And considering all my Space Marines are just basic old snooze fest Marines, not the giant fancy pants ones. And that could be a bit of a bonus. So I might give it a try. I am in Nottingham now, which is pretty much the hub of wargaming in the UK. So anything I want to play, I should be able to find opponents really, eventually, when the pandemic has died down even more. For now, there's potential that I could arrange some one-off games in a socially distant manner. Standing on the opposite side of the table, taking all the necessary precautions. And then when everything opens up again, and within striking distance of such handy places as Warhammer World and Mantic HQ as well, not very far away. I'm sure they're going to go back to having their regular game nights there when everything's died down a bit more. Stu says, my Deathwing Terminators will now have 3 wounds. Is this some kind of sick joke? Deathwing Terminators with 3 wounds. If that's serious, then I am very pleased by this development. I always thought Terminators were a bit too vulnerable. The ultimate killing machines of the Imperium, but there's a 1 in 6 chance that they'll just die. So that would be a big help if they have more wounds now. I do have a lot of Deathwing Terminators, including the Knights. I've got, how many? Maybe about 25-ish Terminator armor models for my Deathwing. Ian says, thanks to you, I've now just bought some Spidey Eggs for my Nightstalk bases. Good. They are very nice. If you've not already placed the order, if you look, then there are actually other spider products on there as well. I think there's a bundle called Spidertopia, where you get the eggs, but you also get spider nests as well. Which I didn't need for this project because I've got the insects and the skull piles. But I think anytime you see Topia on Bad Squiddo, that's generally a bundle deal. I'm willing to bet that Ian forgot about the free chicken promotion. Yeah, there is a code in the video description here, in all my videos in fact. All my video descriptions, right at the bottom. Any orders you place on Bad Squiddo, if you enter that code you get free chicken. So if you didn't do it this time, you'll have to remember that for next time. Because who doesn't want free chicken? Right, finished the browning process. So it actually looks like it's pretty dry already. So I might go on to the next coat on that. Or I might just dive straight onto the insects. So what colour do I want to paint each one? Because there's all different kinds, obviously. I'll pick a few that are going to be lightly coloured and I'll paint those brown now while I've got the brown out. So which brush should we use? It's a bit more of a precision job here, but not fine detail. Let's have this sucker. Ian did forget. Well, you know what? I will mention it to Annie of Bad Squiddo Games and see if that can be sorted out for you, since you did forget. And you did order as a result of this live stream entirely, so I think that should carry some weight when I'm making the case for you. Let's see, is this paint still wet? Yes, it is. The wet palette seems to be doing its job. Okay, which one's going to be nice and brightly coloured? Anyone who doesn't own a wet palette, other than just being a fool, then you don't know what you're missing, because how can you live with paints drying up so rapidly? I should get some kind of wet palette company to sponsor me, really. Because yes, I am quite happy to sell out the cold hard cash. Just going to pick out a few random of these little diddlers, these little gribblies. I think this big long one can be a nice bright colour. Need to add a bit more paint to the wet palette. I'm glad the temperatures have dropped. We were supposed to be getting some terrible thunderstorm, but it's either totally bypassed this town, or it's just finding its way here very slowly. Because there was something like 90% chance of a thunderstorm the other day, and then it didn't happen. Which I was pleased about when I heard that it was coming, because it's been too damn hot for my liking. It's the first time I've used a paintbrush at all in about 3 months. Have I managed to play any more games recently? No. Not miniature games, anyway. There have been some tabletop games played safely, but nothing too exciting miniature related yet. I am thinking of doing something that could be done remotely, which would be a lot of fun, because I do own Dragon Strike, which is the legendary board game. It's a board game / role-playing game, somewhere between Dungeons and Dragons and Hero Quest. It fits between those two nicely. And I'm thinking about playing some of that online and maybe broadcasting it, potentially. I think that would be a lot of fun. Anyone who watches the Andy and Rem show and is familiar with the Forest of Rem, then you know what kind of nonsense I generally come up with when it comes to dungeon mastering. So I think that would be entertaining. The miniatures probably won't be painted, mind you. I've been on the computer a lot recently. I've been doing some video editing, not necessarily just for my own channel. In fact, if you've looked at the Bad Squiddo Games YouTube channel recently, you would have seen a bit of a fancy pants showcase video for one of the products that I did. And then I did something similar on my own channel with that Star Drake video, which you may have seen, which is really just to highlight, in case any miniature companies out there want something like that doing, then I'm someone they can throw money at to get it done, essentially. There are a lot of small companies especially that don't have the funds to hire someone full-time for that kind of stuff. Ian's had Dragon Strike for 30 odd years, never played it. Have you watched the VHS at least? I do have the VHS, but I don't have a player for it. But it is on YouTube though. So anyone who's going to play it with me, I can just make them watch that first. I don't know whether I'd get away with actually broadcasting the entire video though on YouTube. Sounds a bit risky to me for such a high profile channel as mine. Okay, I think that's enough brown on the creatures. Sounds like Ian did watch the VHS. I've watched it. A conservative estimate would be more than 100 times, because I used to play it regularly as a child. I didn't actually own it back then, it was one of my friends on the street that I lived on that owned it. But we used to play it a lot, and force people to watch the VHS constantly because it was so funny. And then I've watched it on YouTube many, many times since then as well. It's only about half an hour long, so it's not a huge time commitment to watch it that many times, and it's endlessly quotable. Okay, let's soap down the brushes now. I haven't used this brush soap in a long time either. Steve's never heard of it. Well, that's unfortunate. It's a masterpiece. I only actually owned a copy of it since a few years ago when I was at the Games Expo, and I saw one in the Bring and Buy section, so I bought it immediately. And I think I might be about to sneeze, so I will politely mute myself. Unless it's a false alarm. Could be a false alarm for now, folks. Only 4 likes on the video so far. This is frankly an outrage. So I immediately bought it, but I'd found that it had some of the dice missing out of it, so I went round to one of the dice stands at the expo and replaced all the dice with the correct sides and colour. So it's pretty authentic. And then when I got home I found there was a couple of the little cards missing as well, so I bought some of those on eBay. So it still didn't end up costing me that much for the game, and it's pretty much complete now. The only things that might be missing, I might have not quite enough little stands for the doors to go on, but those aren't really essential. Stu says the existence of Dragon Strike is news to me. Well, you've missed out as well. So it sounds like there's kind of feverish demand growing for Dragon Strike content on this channel. So I'm definitely going to be setting it up. So I may have multiple groups to play it. There are a few people I've got in mind, some of whom I don't know if they'd actually want it to be broadcast. So I might do some private ones and some to be broadcast as well, if I can pluck the right people. And of course I've still got Dungeon Saga sitting around here somewhere, which could potentially be played like that as well, since it hasn't been sold yet. And I think I've still got it listed on eBay for an obscenely high price, so we'll see what happens with that. If that doesn't sell soon, I'll probably just take it off. It's not really taking up too much room here, so I might end up playing it. I can still use the models for something else as well, like Dragon Strike. Brad says, I still have the models, but the instructions are gone. Brad, if you privately send me a picture of your Dragon Strike set, then I'll tell you exactly what's missing from it. And if you've got one of the books missing, I could potentially send you some pictures of mine so you could actually play it. Which I don't think is in breach of any kind of international laws, since you do own the game itself, you've just lost the book. Steve says Dungeon Saga is a fun game. Well, it is, but I only played it before it was released. Since I've actually owned the game, I haven't played it at all. So I wouldn't know. Okay, I think it's time to commence the bonesmanship. So where is the bone-coloured paint? I've got all my Vallejo paints, or my game colour, on a rack out of shot over here. And I've got all my Citadel ones in a box in front of me. So, let's see. Oh, there we go. This one's actually Army Painter, this bone paint here. Boom. Let's see if there's any juice left to be squeezed out of this. Yeah, nice little splodge there. This fits in the rack as well, just a rack for dropper bottles. And to take away the risk of it falling over, because it's not wall mounted at the moment, it's just sitting on the desk, I've actually screwed it to a little crate that oranges came in behind it with other hobby supplies, so it's not going to fall over. Okay, which brush do we want for the bonery? Well, let's just go for the big one again. The big succulent brush. So let's actually take a little bit of dirty water from there as well and just thin it a little bit. So I'll probably do a couple of thin coats of this, then a wash over it, and then I'll see if I want to do any highlighting or dry brushing after that. Because it is only the base after all. Even though I'm putting quite a lot of effort into the bases. The most effort I ever put into bases are definitely my undead halflings. There's a lot going on there, lots of different types of grass and bushes and flowers and water effects. And that's the only army that I've ever won a Best Painted award with. Although I did jointly win it with my Abyssal Dwarves as well, but the other guy got the trophy. So Ian has got to go. He's got to go to work like an adult. What was your first miniature game and army? Warhammer Fantasy Battle Dwarf? No, in fact it wasn't. So, my first game that I bought would have been Epic Titan Legions. And that was a pretty spicy game, except I didn't play much of it because nobody ever wanted to play it. Because everyone I knew at the time was more interested in regular 40k instead. So I never really fully got the use out of that game that I wanted to. But the first things I painted would have been some of the little tanks that came with that, most likely. And some of the Imperial Knights that were in the box as well. So what year would that have been? Probably 94 or 95. And then, because everyone else was playing regular 40k, I jumped on that bandwagon and got the box which had Space Marines in it, so I did Dark Angels. So that was the first thing I got that was approaching an army. In terms of the first time I had a fully painted army, it would probably be... I had a few armies on and off before this, but then the first army that was fully painted would be my Chaos Warriors, which is when they first split up Chaos Warriors, Beastmen, and Demons into 3 different armies in the mid to late 90s. Probably late 90s. But I don't have any of those anymore, I sold those. But about 2000-ish, I did keep my dwarves that I painted then, which still make up the bulk of the dwarf army that I've got to this day. I do not still have the Titan Legions models, I sold them all. Because children don't appreciate that things might be worth money in the future, and children's parents are often just happy for the children to be getting rid of things, rather than doing the grown-up thing and thinking that maybe certain things should be held on to. They're just happy to free up space in the house, I imagine. I would like to have some of the Titans from back in the day again. Because I never did that great a job on painting anything back then. First things I painted that I was at all proud of would have been probably the Dwarves. Because the Chaos Warriors were all right, but they were mainly just dry brushed in silver. So the Dwarves were the first ones where I thought, hey, these actually look pretty tasty. I had a green Space Marine army, a lighter green, not Dark Angels, around 2000 as well. That was the first 40k army that I had that was fully painted to any kind of standard. But I don't have any of those either now. And then when I got back into the hobby, and then the new 40k edition came out in about 2012, was it? And it was Dark Angels in the box. I took that as a sign that I should dive face first into that particular heap of hobby goodness. Don't want to drop things. Dicey guys here. Stu Gibson says, my first box game was Battle Masters, closely followed by Space Crusade. Okay, well, if we're counting games like that, then I did have Hero Quest as well. But I never really considered painting the miniatures. Let's see, what else did I have? There was Hero Quest. I didn't own Dragon Strike, but I played that a little bit later than Hero Quest. And then there were some other games with miniatures as well. Was it called Dark World or something like that? The ones where you swap the weapons. I bring it up every year or so because I remember it just for the fact that you can take the weapons out and replace them with fancy gold ones when you upgrade your hero. And it had a big manticore in it, I think. So, this brush, some of the bristles aren't cooperating, so I'm going to chop them off. So it'll shrink with time, but it's already a big fat chunky one, so it'll take a fair old while until it's useless. Brad says Dark World was great. It's quite a fun one. Good night to Steve. I'm not sure whether I'll do these broadcasts at this time of night frequently, maybe a bit earlier than this. But I finally got everything set up and ready to paint, so I thought, why not just do it now? I've got nothing else that's urgent, and it's cool enough to do it right now as well. Okay, that's enough bonery. I'm going to pick out a colour for the spider egg sacs now. So, I'm thinking I want them to be a bit of a grey colour. So, I've actually got the white contrast paint, but I don't want to just apply that over brown, that wouldn't work. So I could just paint them in white, and then use that contrast paint on top of it, and that would make them nice and grey. I think that would be nice. So, white. I believe dead white, game colour, fresh from the rack. So, would you find people that are in there right now be interested in seeing some Dragon Strike action broadcast on this channel? With me as the Dragon Master and a select group of people playing the heroes remotely. My suspicion is that people would be interested in it. But I would mainly be doing it for fun, not to attract a vast audience. Let's paint some sacs. Stu is very interested in seeing it. I know it's quite a big deal, people doing like online D&D and that kind of stuff. There are some people that make their living doing that kind of shenanigans. So there's obviously an audience out there for that kind of content. Brad is working on a display board for the Deep Ogre project. Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of that project. Very, very tasty indeed. Raphael, yep, old school and nostalgia is usually a good hook. It certainly can be. So I think I'd probably start off with just standard Dragon Strike, just the basic game itself. And then because there's not that much monster variety, it can then be expanded later by adding miniatures from other games. If anyone has a favourite Dragon Strike quote, drop it in the chat right now, and then I'll give you some of mine. Assuming some of the people who know what Dragon Strike is are actually still in the chat right now. Okay, some plump, succulent white sacks there. No, Raphael, that is not Dragon Strike, and you know it. Some of my favourite quotes from Dragon Strike aren't really that funny on their own out of context. So I'm trying to think of some that are actually funny on their own. I suppose the part where the dwarf insults the warrior by calling him a dunderhead. The dwarf's trapped, encased in a prison, and he says the only way that he can get out is if he gets his hammer. And the warrior says, "Your hammer is so great, why don't you use it to knock the wall down?" And then the dwarf replies with, "Because I don't have my hammer, you dunderhead." It's always fun hearing expressions like that in a fantasy setting. The dwarf does have some good insults, though. The best scene might be the one where the Death Knights jump through the window at the King's banquet. And if you've not seen it, then the description of that should definitely tickle your interest. Yes, it was a very tiny hammer that the dwarf had. Also, the main takeaway from the video, the VHS, is that it's nothing like the game whatsoever. All the miniatures look different that they're using, for the brief shots where they actually show you the miniatures, which I assume was just the prototypes they were using when they made the video. But they don't explain any of the rules. They don't explain how to play, really, other than use your imagination. Because there are actually rules. I do like the special section of the tape at the end for Dragon Masters only, though. And then he tells you the floating head that talks you through the entire video. I actually saw him in something recently on TV, the actor that plays the floating head, even though it's really just a guy and you can clearly see the light catching his collar because he's just wearing black against a black background. So he's not actually a real floating head. But he warns you that during the special section of the tape for Dragon Masters only, there might be somebody at the door or the window listening, so you should check to make sure that they're gone. And until you do so, cast a pause video spell on your VCR. There's a good quote for you. Yeah, but he wasn't a real floating head, unfortunately. I can confirm he does have a full body, unless it was cleverly manipulated with CGI and the other thing that I saw him in. He was definitely on TV, and I checked to make sure it was him because he looked so familiar, and it was. The guy that plays the warrior, I believe, was on American Gladiators. And any other notable people? Yeah, there was somebody. Yeah, there's a wrestler who plays some of the monsters. A relatively well-known wrestler from the early 2000s. Anyone who watched WWF/WWE back then, there was a character who was like a stylist wrestler, which is an odd combo, called Rico. And he plays, I think he's like an orc or something, or a couple of different monsters. You can't tell it's him, I only know because I saw his name in the credits. But yeah, I know lots of the Dragon Strike trivia, if you hadn't guessed. The dwarf seemed familiar. I wouldn't be surprised if the dwarf's been in other things as well. Okay. Any other bits of white that need touching up before I soap down this brush? So I'm sure on a future episode I'll talk more about the time in Nottingham so far, which has been quite a drastic change from where I was before. Very positive change though. The area I'm living in seems quite pleasant. Obviously I'm sure any area could potentially have like axe murderers rampaging through it. But it seems pleasant so far. Let me know what you think of the fancy pants graphics on all the shows now as well on this channel. So I think they're very spicy indeed. And there is a link in the description to the work of the artist, the mysterious artist that's been doing all the work on this channel, the fancy new logos and such. So I think it's a link to the Facebook page of the artist. So if you want to go and like that, that would be nice. What's that about pants? There are people round here with pants. Is that what you're asking? In that case, mostly. Fancy pants. So, there's the white done. Soap down this brush. So, what's coming up this week? Well, there's the Indian Rem show on Tuesday, unless there's more technical hiccups for Mr. Remington, and even if there is, I'll probably still do something on Tuesday, even if he can't participate, just to keep the audience appeased. And then, hopefully, at the end of the week, sometime later on in the week, we'll be able to finish Vermintide, because there's only one more map to do, one more mission. After we've finally completed the most ridiculously difficult one in the entire game, like the 17th attempt, which is actually the highest viewed episode of Vermintide as well. It's got about twice as many views as most of the others for some reason. And then when we finish that, we're going to be going on to Vermintide 2 and playing through all that as well, which is going to be wall-to-wall excitement. So I've been playing a bit of that in preparation, getting my character ready. Obviously I'm still going to be the Witch Hunter, but I've been trying out the Dwarf as well. You have more customization options in Vermintide 2. So 6 likes on the video. Now that's a bit more like it. A bit more like it. So let's put the brushes away. So these bases are going to have these suckers on them. So is this the right one for this base? Let's see. Yes. So he's going to plop in there. And he, which is the right way around, this is it, it's going to plop in there. So when they're finished, they're going to look very nice, hopefully. Let's try and get the camera to focus on them and nothing else. Yeah, I'll do something about that. Work in progress. So I think you can see them pretty well though here. So the Dreadfiend Twins, their base is going to look very colourful when they're finished. Obviously they're nowhere near it now. But each of the little gribbly creatures is going to be painted differently. Apart from all the spiders are just going to be black, I think. But all the others are going to be various different multicoloured abominations, maybe with black polka dots and stripes on. Just look extra weird. And then there's going to be a texture paint applied to all the blank areas on the base. And then probably some shrubberies, something like that. And then they'll be done. And that'll be the first 2 Night Stalker units ready for the table. After that, I've got butchers to work on for the Night Stalkers. But once these 2 are finished, I'm going to go on and do more Necromunda first, because I want to get playing that. I've already got about 6 Kings of War armies, so I can't really justify putting off something for a new system to partially complete another army that's not going to be done for ages anyway. So the Night Stalker is going to be a long-term project. And when they're ready, it'll be a lot of fun. They're not going to take too long to paint once I start really flying into them, because there's a lot of dry brushing and contrasts and washes going on with them. I've also got this big guy who's partly painted as well. Let's put him in this camera shot instead. So look how tall he is. So this is my Shadow Hulk. Gigantic, hideous monster. Heavily converted, tentacles, faces all over him. Obviously this is going to take a long time to paint. I made a lot of work for myself by adding all the ridiculous faces to him. Lots and lots going on there. So that's going to be a very fun project to paint. So he's going to be, probably before I get onto the butchers, I'll probably do him first after the Necromunda stuff, or at the same time. I can't really focus on just one project at a time. I've got to have about 5, so that when I can't be bothered doing one of them, I can just reach and grab a different one, and I'm always working on something that way. So Necromunda will be next, including the ladies, converted, corpse grinder bits and Escher bits combined. Because not all the factions have ladies in them for some reason. I haven't really read the corpse grinder fluff yet, which I need to do, because I've read all the fluff in the main Necromunda rulebook, which is incredibly rare for me. And I need to read the Gangs of the Underhive and the whatever the corpse grinders book's called, the Book of Ruin. So I'll read the backstory for them. And I bet there's some fluff reason that they're not supposed to have any women in there, but who cares? And then I'll get to painting them. Made them a bit more characterful, taken off the helmets, space wolf heads. And any other comments before I wrap this one up? I'm pretty sure it's been going about an hour now. Yeah, 1 hour 3 minutes. I think that's good enough for a start on this test run of whatever this is permanently going to be named, whether it's like the orange paint zone or something ridiculous like that. Also, before I go, check out this. Dun dun dun. Top quality mug. What do you think about that? It's got a spoon in it because there was a drink in there. Very tasty indeed. All merch with not just this logo, but also the Andy and Rem Show logo and the Forest of Rem logo is available via the Redbubble link in the description. So anyone who purchases any of that merch, not only will I look forward to seeing pictures of people using all the various merch items, such as mugs and shirts, stickers, pillows even. There's all kinds of shenanigans on there. Masks, all kinds of stuff. Clocks, coasters. Anything you can think of is probably on that Redbubble link. But not only will I enjoy seeing the pictures of it, but also, when it comes to the Forest of Rem, anyone who's bought a piece of merch from my Redbubble, just let me know who you are, and then a character will be named after you in the Forest of Rem. If it's a tiny piece of merch like a sticker, you'll probably just get a little goblin named after you that dies after about 2 seconds. If it's a larger purchase, you'll probably be some kind of ancient deity that has to do battle with Remington before also most likely getting decapitated, because that's how most creatures meet their end. Any other comments before we wrap this one up? Otherwise, I'm going to close this one down. I'll see if there's anything going on the Facebook first. Let's see. Various likes on the posts that I did for this. On the Twitter. Yeah, don't forget all the links down there in the description as well. There is, of course, Twitter, Facebook groups, and all the other social media shenanigans down there, not to mention all the fundraising sources as well. If you haven't noticed, I've been telling you to give me all of your money. The scrolling text there, how have I worded it? I think it's give me all your money, peasants, which is a pretty... Some would say that's harsh, but I would say it's also fair. There's Patreon, there's PayPal, there's Redbubble merch. All that. Give me your money. So, anything else? Yeah, let me know what time of day also you want to see these things. Because we've got quite a few viewers and 7 likes now. Not bad. The view count obviously drops off as I start wrapping up the episode because people realise there's not going to be any more juicy content and I'm just into the part where I demand money from you. But yeah, I think you can tolerate just a minute of money demands at the end of each episode. I'm resisting the urge to become one of those channels that immediately opens up the video with demanding stuff from you. That usually puts me off a video when I'm told to like and subscribe and support the Patreon and all that stuff within 1 minute of the video starting. That usually puts me off. So I'm avoiding doing all that nonsense and saving it till the end, while of course having the scrolling text, which I like to think isn't too invasive. So next time we'll continue work on these. I may even apply the washes to them off camera, as scandalous as that may seem, because no one wants to see washes dry, because they could take an entire episode to completely dry, which seems like a bit of an annoyance. I've got other things to work on as well. I'm going to prime my Necromunda stuff so I can work on that next time as well. And if there are no other comments, then I'll be wrapping this up any moment. Don't forget to check out the Ending Rem show on Tuesday night. Don't forget to look out for Vermintide stream this week as well. Hopefully we'll be able to finish the last mission and then move on to Vermintide 2, which will be extra spicy, not just for the content, but also for the channel ratings, because I don't think anyone's searching out Vermintide 1 videos anymore. So that could bring in a whole new audience, which would be very spicy indeed. And Brad says, peace out, yo. So yes, goodbye to you. And I will bring up that beautiful orange wall there. And yeah, don't forget to check out all the links. If you're placing an order from Bad Squiddo, don't forget to put in the code for a free chicken. And with that, I think all that remains to be said is good night out there, whatever you are.